ICOT Committee, July 10th, 2019.
10th, 2019 Italk meeting. I think Dick is not coming. Stuart may be coming late. I think we're also expecting Greg at some point. We'll just head to the agenda. Item number 1, approval of meeting minutes from last month. Everybody had a chance to review and or comment, not motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Anybody have any issues or comments? Let's vote. All those in favor of approval? Okay. Item number 2, public comment. Do we have anybody from the public wishing to address the committee? I don't have any speaker slips. Any committee member comments? Okay. Item number 3, Hassan and the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to all of you. It's a good day for our region today. We're going to hear later today and read tomorrow about signing of the MOU between Sanjag and the Navy on Grand Central. So I'm really happy, and I want to thank Irene and her team for getting us through this morning press conference. I'm hoping that the discussion on the regional transportation plan and the discussion about future needs for the county gets people in San Diego to believe that there are possibilities out there, and that the fact that things could be expensive and difficult is not a reason to stop pursuing great opportunities. And I think today is a good start with the Navy to start pursuing a major transportation hub near the airport, probably the largest in California. So very hopeful and grateful. We're going to the board this Friday to talk about 2 important things. The board requested that we talk about the 5 big moves. There will be a very detailed presentation Friday starting at 9 o'clock. I think it's fair to say some board members have questions, rightly so. What hasn't changed is the fact that this region needs to meet 19% per capita greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. That hasn't changed. That will not change unless the law changes. And what hasn't changed is to meet that requirement, you have to reduce vehicle mile travel, period, end of discussion. People say, well, what if we all drove electric cars? Unfortunately, the law as such that the state takes credit for all the fleet, the clean fleet, and we have to reduce 90% ourselves. I think I can't even begin to tell you how critical it is for this region to meet that requirement. Short of meeting that requirement, not only we lose tens of billions of dollars of state and federal funding, but we cannot move any project, even with local money, even local project, by law. So we're going to try to communicate that to the board on Friday. Colleen and Ray Major is going to go through the 5 big moves in more detail. Nothing really changes since April 26th presentation, but there's more information to that. The second item that's going to the board, I feel like beating a dead horse, is Transnet. We still have no money in Transnet. We're going to talk about the corridor portion of Transnet, which is the 38%. The other 62% is formula money that goes to the local transit agencies. When it comes to 38%, between now and 2023, we have a total net of Transnet of $46.8 million. Period. That's it. Between now and 2023.
After that.
Huh?
After that payment.
After that payment,
Yeah.
right. 46.8 between now and 2023. We have about today's dollars 1.4 billion total between now and 2048 after we pay the debt of Transnet. That's over the life of that program. And so all this media reports about Sandag is taking the highway money, giving it to transit. There is no money to be taken. You're going to inform the board of that? Because they and myself will be making the presentation. The agenda is already posted. So, and these two items are really linked. The fact that this region has a lot of thinking and decision-making to do in the next few years. And I hope our board of directors will allow the team here at Sandag to move forward and detail the 5 big moves. And 2, understand, the truth should matter. The reality is there isn't enough funds in transit to build any project, at least not in the near future. Over 80% of the remaining transit money, the 2.3 billion for the life of transit, is going to come after 2030. So there is no money, at least for the next 15 years, to do anything besides clearing projects and making it ready, and that's important. So we're going to go to the board early September. There is right now a $46.8 million transit, $250 million of federal and state funds. Combined, they're about close to 300, right? 290 million. We're going to be asking the board to actually program to clear project environmentally, do the corridor management, the complete corridor studies, buy transit cars for North County Transit so they'll be able to run their system every 30 minutes, do a couple of mobility hubs, including the Grand Central Station. We're going to ask the board to allocate this money for us to either environmentally clear it, design it, so we're ready to compete for federal and state money. So really, that's what, as far as I'm concerned, between now and 2035, the only money available from transit and federal will be there to clear a project environmentally, not to build anything, period, in discussion. I don't know how many times I'm going to say it. It's not going to change what I'm telling you. 47 million between now and 2023, 2.3 billion expenditure year dollar until the end, which is about 1.4 today's leverage. So that's pretty much my report. I'll be happy to answer any question you want to, and I encourage you to watch or listen to the board meeting on Friday.
Hassan, thank you for the report.
Of course.
Good to see you again. So I asked Ariana about 3 months ago, sort of Italk's role in this going forward, and some of the promises made in 2004, and Italk's role in making sure the money's spent the right way. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're here in a situation here where there's not much money left. But what's going forward with the 5 big moves and the projects that haven't been completed? How do those fit in to the 5 big moves, and then how is Italk's role related to, finally, when your report comes out in November with the plan, with projects listed, how do we as Italk make a position on this? Because it is affecting sort of the projects that Italk's supposed to follow as a result of 2004.
Well, and that's a very good question, and a fair question. 2 things. One is the 14 projects that are listed that are not funded, and it's not going to be funded because there is no funds, at least between now and 2035. Those 14 projects are important in the context of the 5 big moves in the following way. So, for example, there is a project there that says build an 1-lane HOV in the 78 each direction. I believe that corridor needs some attention, right? But I don't believe building an HOV each direction is going to solve the problem with the 78. As opposed to the 5 big moves is looking at the 78 saying, okay, we need to build a network of managed lane on the 78. We need to improve the interchange. We need to build a state-of-the-art transit system. commuter rail system that goes through the employment center and redo the sprinter. And we need to put some active transportation investment. Do a complete corridor like we're doing with the I-5. We would argue as staff that what we're trying to do for the 78th corridor will do 10 times better than building an HOV each direction. So if you ask me, would I recommend to the board that they build an HOV each direction in 70? I say no. Would I recommend to the board the complete corridor concept I went over? Yes. So these projects probably will not be done the way we listed them, but they will be done in a way that not only improves throughput, but reduces greenhouse gas emission and reduces vehicle mile travel. I think the managed lane system, if you have at least 2 lanes each direction and linked to others, I think will work. I think we are looking for a complete network in San Diego County where you could ride the hot lane every freeway. You could ride all day by going from one hot lane to another. That's our vision. So would I recommend to the board that they, even if they had the money, let's assume they had the money, would I recommend to do the 14 projects over there? No, that's not the winning strategy. I gave you an example before. We could not build a bigger highway than Houston, Texas. They become congested soon. But do we need to add capacity? Absolutely.
So I guess the question is going to be a political issue,
Yes.
obviously, we've seen play out, but the political question still is going to be as far as ITOC's concerned, how does getting off those projects, I don't know, is that something that?
Is that something that you ask us as an oversight committee for our recommendation? Does the board take action and then you tell us that this is the change to Transnet project?
Yeah, obviously, when we change, if the plan gets adopted and the change, you need the first to know about it, absolutely. But let me also remind you that the ordinance was very clear. The ordinance says the board of directors with a 2/3 vote can change the priority. So they could do a new plan and I'll come to you and say, here's what the plan does. So the ordinance did not say you must do these 14 projects. The ordinance said with changing circumstances, rightly so. You know, there's a big difference between 2004 and 2048. So if things changes, the board of directors should be able to change priority. So if these 14 projects changes, the mixer, I will tell you this, all of these 14 projects in that corridor will be addressed, is how to be addressed. But you will be absolutely knowing how that changes.
Oh, thank you. I've always been interested to know how this is going to go forward.
Yeah,
ITOC's
you
concerned
know,
about
look, I mean, to be very frank with you, there is, you probably hear in the media, you know, beside myself being a communist and a Soviet planner, you're hearing that, you know, there is not a universal agreement out there. I believe this region deserves and needs a transportation system that's balanced, highway and transit. Most of us will still use the highway system when we're all done. But we need some diversity, we need some choices. And we need to meet the load demand. And you're not going to meet the load demand by keep adding interchanges and adding vehicle miles. That's a reality that the board has to. How does that go? You probably, your guess is as good as mine. My job is to make recommendations, I will make decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Switching gears to the MOU with the Navy, is that going to give you the opportunity to have a period of time to have first right to work with them on that, and they'll stop their process with their other RFP with other developers, or?
Well,
or
that's a very good question. First of all, the MOU right now allows both entities and the Navy to start talking legally, you know, because we submitted for their RFI, other people did. The hope is the MOU would lead, the Navy still be in charge of what developers they choose, as long as the Grand Central, the transportation hub, is part of that development.
Okay.
But this, our hope is this would lead to a development agreement with the Navy. And we'll continue the process of clearing the NEPA. And once that's done, we'll ask the private sector for a P3, public-private partnership, We're not a developer, Sendak is not, we're not, no desire to be a developer, but we have a desire to have the Grand Central be part of any development agreement. So that's the, I think this is a very significant step. I mean, this does not oblige us or the Navy, you know, to do certain things except to say we can talk and we can move to the next step, which is a no, I would say binding from the standpoint is now we need to figure out what to do. My hope is in the next 2 years we would have an NEPA clearance and we would have a development agreement. And you know, people this morning asked me, you know, oh, this, you know, so let's say you have a development agreement with a nuclear NEPA. So is it going to take 50 years? Well, if San Diego wanted to take 50 years, yeah. But this could be done in 5 to 10 years. I mean, look, LA built 2,000 lane miles of rail between 1990 and 2010. So, you know, we could do it fast if we wanted to. I think the most significant part of this is people need to start believing that they're doing big things, as difficult as it is, as expensive is good for the region. You know, we're talking about probably the biggest economic development project in the city. When you talk about 10 to 15,000 housing units, 10 to 15 million square foot of internet, and people move over to the airport.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Right. Items number 4 and 5, these are both on consent. 4 is the Transit Senior Mini and an objector. Interstate 5, Boyd improvement to Allen's here. If anybody has any reason to pull these off or has specific questions on either one of the two. No? We want to make a motion for approval?
Information.
Or information? Scratch that. All right. Moving on to item number 6, Ariana.
Yes. We have a few updates since your last meeting. You remember you heard and discussed the delegation of approval for admin modifications to your RTIP. That was also presented at the Transportation Committee. There was a lot of discussion, including the same type of concerns that Italk had regarding visibility into project changes within group listings. The board also considered that we're the only agency that does not have that delegation, that there's other checks and balances in place for board policy, that there's an opportunity for streamlining and efficiencies and cuts staff times and costs. And while that wasn't a unanimous vote at the Transportation Committee, that was ultimately approved by the board. So that delegation of approval for the admin modifications for our TIP. It hasn't gone to the board yet? Oh, thank you so much for that clarification. Sorry about that. So it was recommended by the Transportation Committee that the board approve it. It will go to the board in the end of this month. Okay. Thank you. And then we also had, let's see, the board approved the Smart Growth Incentive Grant Program Schedule Extension that you saw at your last meeting for the La Mesa North Spring Street project. The I-5 Voight budget amendment, which was on your consent calendar today, that was approved. They authorized the issuance of grant anticipation notes for the Mid-Coast project, and that's on your agenda for today. The board also discussed the 5 big moves, as our executive director mentioned, and as he mentioned, they'll be further discussing the approach to those 5 big moves at an upcoming meeting this Friday. The board presented Jonathan Tibbetts, former Italk member Jonathan Tibbetts, with a recognition for his 8 years of service. And then our own Chair Fuller presented the Italk annual report for 2019 to the board as well. There was unfortunately some confusion during the presentation that came up during the item as to whether the pie charts that are included in the annual report were accurate. They are indeed accurate. And that will also be made clear.
No, I just kept my mouth shut and let Ariana and Jose step up.
So the fact that that information is accurate within your Italk annual report will be made clear to the board at this Friday's meeting. And then the press release for that annual report went out this morning, so you should have gotten a copy of that. Let me know if you didn't. And then you may have noticed that our communications team is taking pictures today, and that is part of getting the word out via social media regarding your annual report as well.
Thank you. This is a biggie. Number 7, the annual selection of Italk chair and vice chair. I've officially termed out.
Oh, you sure?
Sorry, yeah. I got
There's
it.
a term limit for it.
Hassan pulled me aside and he said, "We're done with you."
Maybe we just need to discuss the term limits.
Hoping 1 and 2 of you would be considering chair and vice chair. Anybody want to?
I'll go ahead and claim vice chair before somebody else does.
All right.
This is my second meeting, but I have been on the committee before, and I seem to remember it.
Oh, that's right, you were on.
And I'll be happy to be the vice chair if that's.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Michael, when were you on the, how long ago was it? You were on Italk?
Did you start? We figured you should-
I took his place. So however long I've been.
It was like 2011.
That was right. Congratulations.
Mr. Barnum?
No, I mean, I know we had some discussion with Dick last time, but and maybe Stuart. I mean, Stuart's most recently the chair, so and I was chair, so I'm more maybe next cycle I would like to fit in, but I don't know.
Right now.
I will give Greg an opportunity if you would like, or Kai.
I would probably say on my end, I'm not prepared to take that on. I would probably take a second or look at it. I don't think I've been here long enough to really love that. So I would probably defer to either Kai or even Michael on that, and maybe take a next go around and have a look at it. Let me at least get through
Understood.
6 months of a term here.
Understood.
Now, you were
Before you
chair.
throw me to the
You were chair
wolves.
4 years ago, 5 years ago.
I was chair a number of years ago. I don't remember when.
Before I-
This, May of, I mean, the following May is I term out completely, so, you know, if I'd consider doing it, just be my last hurrah, I guess. If
Is that an
makes sense to
official-
you guys.
I'd like to,
All right, yes.
If you
I'd like
guys
to
agree,
nominate
if
Kai.
you guys agree.
Second.
That was easy.
All right, so we have Kai as chair, Michael as vice chair. Anybody have any objections? Right, I would make the motion for Kai as chair, Michael Kenny as vice chair. Somebody second that?
Oh, you're gonna. Oh, yeah. I'll second.
All right, all those in favor? Congratulations.
I wrote down you two both volunteered for
You
next
heard
year.
Mike whisper in my ear, I better show up.
Thank you guys. No, it's thank you.
Hey, Michael, we showed up to the meeting today, okay? Let's put it that. There's 2 folks that, Stuart and
I'm not writing that down. I wrote down you volunteer.
No, seriously, thank you guys.
Thank you.
On to item number 8, this is the Transnet agreed upon procedures. Lisa and our consultant. Good morning.
Good morning. So to my right is Tricia Foster with Davis Farr. Jennifer Farr, the partner on the engagement, was unavailable today, but you're in very good hands with Tricia. She's been involved with these annual compliance audits for many years, and she's presented to you many times, so she probably looks familiar. So one of the Italk responsibilities is to conduct an annual fiscal and compliance audit of transit-funded activities. And this process takes more than a year. So as you may recall, back in May, the Italk did appoint a subcommittee for this audit process, and that is Dick Bortman, Stuart Halpern, Kai Raymer, and Tracy Drager. And since then, they've worked with the auditors to review changes to, suggested changes to the fiscal year 2019 agreed upon procedures, the AUP as we call it, which Tricia will take you through shortly. We do have in the second page of attachment 1 provides you with the audit schedule, so you can see the time frame for each different component. The next time the auditors will come back would be in March, and that's when they would be presenting the results of the draft audits to you. And we do have an action item today. We're hoping that you will approve this. So once Tricia is done, then we'll come back to me and I will go through that item. And with that, I will hand it over to Tricia.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so as Lisa mentioned, we've been working with the Italk subcommittee on the development of any changes to the procedures. So on June 7th, we submitted the suggested procedures to the Italk subcommittee for the cities, the Caltrans, transit operators, Sandag, and the Italk. We asked for any feedback regarding the procedures, anything you wanted to change, and ultimately we had some good conversation, and we collaborated back and forth, and I'm just going to go over with you the proposed changes that I believe that we all kind of agreed upon and are seeking approval for today. So not much has changed this year, but what we have done is we've suggested to add a procedure specifically testing payroll transactions when the payroll expenditures exceed 20% of total Transnet expenditures for the Transnet side of things, Schedule A, and then also we added this procedure to the RTCIP, Schedule C. Additionally, we removed the procedure for the MOE reindexing. So if you guys remember, we reindexed the MOE last go around. However, that's only required for the ordinance once every 3 years. So today we're recommending removal of that procedure. And finally, the last procedure that we're proposing is to basically just add a footnote to the RTCIP schedule, Schedule C, for the jurisdictions to add a footnote whenever they have committed the funds but haven't spent it within 7 years, because now we're going into the process of it's been 7 years and agent jurisdictions should really be starting to spend this money down. Those are basically the 3 procedures that we are trying to change. We've also made some suggestions and recommendations that we're hoping to maybe incorporate in future AEP years. Essentially just to provide some sort of direction to the agencies regarding their reporting of unrealized gains and losses on Schedule A and C. We've seen jurisdictions do it very differently. Some report it, some don't. So we're trying to get some more consistency for every jurisdiction to report the same. This is currently in process. Maybe will affect next AEP year, but not this year. We're also requesting or providing recommendation to provide direction to the agencies in reporting their debt service arrangements on Schedule A and B. Again, we're seeing a little bit of an inconsistency with that. I believe we are going to be trying to implement the change next year as well. And then finally, the last thing that we did develop was an indirect cost questionnaire. So for all agencies, we submitted that via email to the subcommittee on June 26th, and it's just a small questionnaire that basically says, is your indirect cost plan reviewed by a cognizant agency? Anyway, it just has very specific questions so we can, for the reporting purposes, and for reporting purposes, that'll be a lot more consistent on a go-forward basis. I think that there was one question that we did receive via email, and that was basically if you could add, like if there's a formal definition of what the indirect cost can entail, and at this time, the answer is we don't have a formal definition, and if we were to add one, it would need to go through an amendment process with Board Policy 31. So that's not going to be added. But anyway, those are basically the procedures that we're changing and any suggested recommendations for this upcoming year.
So the indirect cost rate, to find it, you said it has to go through a amendment process. That's a board amendment?
Board Policy number 31 needs to be amended to include a specific definition of what can be included as indirect costs. Right, Lisa?
If we were actually to require a definition to just have defined items, which would be very difficult because it's not. If we were to say to every agency they have to follow this exact definition and have to find in what bucket they put everything. Yeah, that would have to be approved by the board, and that might be a problem. Well, because it's not, because especially if they're following the federal guidelines, that's that is defined. Here's what you can have in there. So that's pretty easy, but not all of them do, and there really isn't a requirement to do that. So that's kind of where there's that wiggle room. Is if they have an internal process that seems reasonable, which has been looked at by the auditors in the past, then they can go ahead and include the indirect. There's no problem with that. It's keeping the rate current, So it's, because if they're not updating it every so many years, then it's a real stale number, and they could be applying too much indirect, or too little. And so, you know, this is, by having this checklist, this is another way of being able to report the information back to the Italk, kind of across the board with all the jurisdictions, and taking another look at it and saying, okay, can we really move forward with more stringent rules than what we're allowing now, that the board is going to accept, not just the Italk, but the board has to accept it. And that's where we run into the issue of, if the board is made up of representatives from the different jurisdictions, and they have different methods, and they feel that the methods that they're using are good, they're reasonable, then the board members may vote on the side of keeping it as it is right now, not necessarily a recommended change that the Italk is pushing forward. So, you know, that's why this has been, you know, we've been walking on eggshells for many years with this, because of the conversations that we've had with different jurisdictions.
Yeah,
so we're trying to find ways of providing deeper information to you.
And transparency.
Yeah, and a lot of transparency. So we think that this questionnaire is another really good first step with that. And then we can build.
Why wouldn't they just follow the federal?
Yeah, well, okay, so the...
Seems like a simple,
yeah,
everybody does the same.
right.
Half are doing it and half aren't.
Right, because they don't, the reason to follow the federal would be for grant purposes. If for your grants you would like to charge indirect, you have to follow those guidelines. But not all of them do that. For the smaller cities, it could be too cumbersome for them to do that. It's a lot of work. You have to have either a federally approved auditor or cognizant agent be the reviewer, and yeah, it's very time consuming on part of the staff, as well as there could be a large cost involved to do that, and so they may choose to not do it because indirect isn't going to be enough for them to get that additional amount. So they won't use that process, but they still want to apply, you know, these indirect costs across the board for the different revenue sources that they're receiving, and those that qualify. So they're going to come up with their own methodology, and that's what's being reviewed by the auditors as well. Is that something that's reasonable?
How many different processes are there with the cities? I mean, are they
Yeah,
two, three, or is there?
Oh, I'd say it's more than
Yeah.
3, definitely, yeah.
That seems-
And we'll find that out with this
Yeah.
questionnaire.
Yeah.
Well, it just seems like if, you know, that everybody can, if you've got all these different processes, everybody can sort of, I guess that's what you want, wiggle room. You got a lot of wiggling going on.
Yes, exactly. Right, right,
Interesting.
yeah. And one of the reporting procedures would be what that rate is.
Yes, we do. We
Right.
calculate the rate, we calculate the percentage of transnet expenditures to
Right.
that are indirect costs. We report it all in the report, so it's so you guys can all see exactly what the agencies are doing, who is getting reviewed by a cognizant agency, who isn't.
Right.
You know.
But how do you, if you have 10 different ways of doing the indirect costs, is that listed each, or how do you, so you list for each one the indirect costs, where they do it, how do you compare it then? Because that's
Well,
it.
it's not a
seems-
comparison. They're not, you're not comparing against each other. It's just whether the process that they're using is a reasonable process. Just because there's a federal, you know, way of doing it doesn't mean that's the only way that you can. So
Understand.
it's, yeah, so it's looking
But how
at
do you, well, maybe I don't
determine if
understand.
perhaps that they're charging an unreasonable amount. Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, that's part of reporting back to the Italk and saying, okay, here are the numbers. But also taking a step back and saying, you know, in totality, does this make sense?
Right.
It's not, yeah, so, and it has for the past, I think maybe 1 year there was a number that we didn't like. But otherwise, it's been okay. And, you know, we talked to that jurisdiction and said, hey, you know, can you relook at everything?
Fair enough.
questions,
And-
Tricia or Lisa?
Well,
Oh, is there more? I'm sorry.
I interrupted, the question started with me interrupting them, so they were still,
Yeah.
they were in process.
Yeah, and then we just finally just made some grammatical changes, but nothing other significant changes, so that's about all I have.
So we do have an action item. The Italk is asked to approve the proposed fiscal year 2019 Transnet agreed upon procedures. And if there are any other questions, we'd love to respond to them. If not, then we're asking for your approval.
Anything else?
Didn't see that. I would make a motion that we approve item number 8 as recommended by staff.
Second it?
All those in favor? Excellent.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 9, is an MOA with the City of Imperial Beach for the Transit Debt Financing Program. Lisa's one of
Thank you.
the city's public works directors here.
Yes. So, as you're aware, SANDEC does have a debt program. We have bonds, and we also have a $100 million commercial paper program. We just call that its own program, but it's part of the debt program as a whole. So the City of Imperial Beach is asking to borrow $1.3 million for their Imperial Beach Boulevard Enhancement project. And this, we go through several steps. This actually takes several months just to get to this point. So the first thing that we do is we look at capacity analysis. We put that together for the city just to determine if they're going to have enough sales tax coming in to cover the repayment of this over the time frame that they're requesting. So they did request a 5-year repayment term. We use a 2.5% rate of interest. Commercial paper is variable, so they would have to pay whatever the rate is at the time, and there are some fees associated with that. But the 2.5% that we use for the capacity analysis actually does, for the past many years, has been higher than the total cost of fees plus interest. So we do beef that up a little bit there, just in case. Once we determine that there is enough funding, then we go on to looking more at the project, and we go through a series of requirements. So your attachment 2 does list those requirements. And you know, we want to make sure that the project itself is going to qualify. We do request that it is a congestion relief project. It has to be capital in nature. The life of the expected useful life of the project does have to be longer than the repayment period, which it is. The city has to agree to the repayment terms, which they have. We definitely want to keep our tax exempt status. So we talk to both our SANDEC General Counsel and we have bond counsel weigh in on this. They look at these different requirements to ensure that the responses that the city has provided us, as well as other information that we may have, is going to keep our tax exempt status very important to us. And so once we go through all of that and we determine that this project does qualify, then we go back to the city and we ask them to obtain approval from their council to move forward before we even come to you. So your attachment 1 is the city's signed resolution. And if you take a look at that, you will notice that there is actually a total of up to $1.5 million in the resolution. There were 2 projects listed there that we were originally moving forward on, and it was after the council meeting that it was realized that the second project, which was for, they wanted to borrow $200,000, didn't qualify as a congestion relief. And while it was capital in nature, in order for us to move forward with that in the commercial paper program, we would have had to go through a bunch of extra steps. And so the city decided, instead of delaying this process for the larger project, to pull the project at this time. But because city council did approve up to 1.5 million and they're requesting 1.3, we're still good. So then that brings us to this point. So the Italk within the ordinance does have a requirement to review any proposed debt financings to ensure that the benefits of the proposed financing for accelerating project delivery, avoiding future cost escalation and related factors exceed issuance and interest costs. Now, the term benefits that's in there does not necessarily mean an economic benefit, which means that, of course, that the cost of borrowing would be less than the cost of the project if they waited until all of the Transnet came in, years from now, and then they could just do pay-go. It's not necessarily that benefit. In this case, there is a little bit of that. It's also the community benefit. And in this case, there is a very large community benefit because of the additions that they're doing to the location that's going to help the congestion relief in that area. So they do have strong community support on that. So this is a discussion item. So the Italk is asked to review and discuss a request by the City of Imperial Beach to borrow the $1.3 million of commercial paper through the Transnet debt financing program for the Imperial Beach Boulevard Enhancement project. And as mentioned, we do have a representative from the city here in case there are any project-related questions or anything technical that we are unable to respond. So with that, it's open for discussion.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question just from a general standpoint of project description. Is it Imperial Beach Boulevard? Is it limits, and what are the types of improvements being done or proposed?
No problem. Imperial Beach Boulevard, I'm Eric Michelet, Public Works Director. Imperial Beach Boulevard is one of the two main arterials in Imperial Beach. It runs from basically the 5 freeway through San Diego, hits Imperial Beach around 13th Street, runs all the way down to the beach. This project is looking to enhance that entire stretch of Imperial Beach Boulevard in Imperial Beach. So it goes the whole way, and to get that done, we wanted to get some more funding up front to make that happen. It's a very expensive project. As far as improvements, we're talking about transit-related improvements at the bus stops. We've got a big pedestrian boardwalk down by the pedestrian improvements along the whole stretch. This stretch of roadway has multiple schools on it. So a while back we did a whole safe routes to school study. We wanted what came out of that. We're looking to add bike lanes, add pedestrian improvements, widening sidewalks, curb bulb outs, all that kind of thing to make it a little safer for the students to get to school. A lot of students in Imperial Beach walk to school or bike to school. On this roadway, there currently is no bike lanes. Areas of it are 4 lanes wide. Speeds are probably a little excessive for what you want to see in a school zone, that kind of thing. So improvements to the roadway itself, the paving is in a situation that needs to be improved, new striping, crosswalks, just kind of all that things we're looking to do to enhance the ability of people to traverse that part of town.
Is this is that the total cost of the project, or does that include all your?
Oh yeah, this is the total cost of the project is $10 million. So we've already spent $1 million or so in design, that kind of thing. We have multiple grants related to the project. There's an ATP grant that got assigned to it. We had a project also includes stormwater funding, and we're going to be improving, things you guys might not care about is storm drain, sewer. There's quite a few elements to this project. The reason we're asking to kind of push this forward is I don't want to go back into that road 2 years from now to do anything extra. So we're pushing, we pushed sewer funds in, we pushed everything we had to get it all done one time and kind of be done there. So that's why we're taking advantage of this program, or we'd like to take advantage of this program. I've had success with it up in Del Mar, and it's a great project, and we're just looking to get it all done at one time.
Okay.
What's roughly the schedule then for getting to construction?
We've started construction. We have enough of that, with the money we already have, we already began construction. We started in approximately, let's call it March. We look to be complete next March.
Oh, okay, great.
Because you're drawing it, it's all the draws are in 2019.
Yeah.
So they're I'm assuming they're under construction.
We are under construction.
Where is this for input, right? We don't.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Our action is just for discussion.
A discussion, if you have any comments, this is going to the Transportation Committee next week, Friday, the 19th, and then to the Board of Directors for approval on July 26th. So if you had any comments that you would like relayed to them, then we would take those at this time.
I mean, from my standpoint, I'm generally always in favor of getting projects out and delivered and getting, you know,
Do it right
combining
the
things
first
like
time.
this and getting it out in the roadway once and stuff is, I think that's a win-win for everybody, so.
Agreed.
So it's, when would the money be available to the city had they not borrowed it?
For using their sales tax?
Yeah.
That would be up to the city to decide if they had to shuffle projects that are currently in the RTIP and delay some others in order to free up their sales tax. Or it could be several years if they kept everything else on schedule
Like
and
5
started.
years? 3 years?
If we'd waited, it would have taken us 3 years to accumulate it.
So 2.5% for 3 years versus whatever benefit they have.
Right.
by doing it.
Yeah, and really looking at the community benefit, that's very beneficial. And Eric is familiar with that because when the city of Del Mar borrowed commercial paper, there was a greater community benefit than there was an economic at that time. And so that's when we had to go to general counsel and say, hey, can you interpret what the term benefit means? Because that's what the Italk has to look at, and was determined it really isn't necessarily economic. It's, you know.
You should see some economic benefit
Oh, yeah.
in terms of property value.
Agreed.
Getting the kids to school, that's true. There's certainly benefits, but there will be an economic benefit. It's probably well more than 2.5%.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations. It's like a good project.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, good to
Thank
see
you for your time.
Thanks a lot.
Do you know soccer, Jackie Robinson live 20 years ago?
I made my notes for Del Mar.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We've seen each other in different places. Right. Item number 10, this is the 2018 RTIP Amendment number 5. Sue, welcome.
Thank you for having me. So at its July 26th meeting, the Board of Directors is scheduled to approve Amendment number 5 to the 2018 RTIP. This amendment is going to the board because it contains the commercial paper from Imperial Beach, and that has to be approved by the board before they can approve the RTIP. Normally, we just got a transportation committee. Amendment number 5 is regularly scheduled amendment to the 2018 RTIP, and this amendment incorporates the changes due to the SENDAC approved budget. So the Italk is asked to review and comment on the RTIP amendment, specifically on the eligibility of projects and focusing on significant cost increases and or scope changes on major corridor projects included in the expenditure plan. Attachment 1 is your summary of changes report beginning on page 3 or page 65 of your tablets. And the summary of changes it summarizes all the changes that are shown in table 2, the detailed tables. So the major changes in this amendment include increased funding for bike projects in the SANDAG budget and the full funding of the Central Avenue and Pershing Avenue Bikeway construction phases. Increased EMP funding in the Regional Habitat Conservation Fund. The programming of the commercial paper for Imperial Beach Safer to School. Fully funded construction costs for the county's Camino del Rey drainage project. And also the signal space optimization project that SANDAG had been had programmed, which was SAN 246, was deleted as it will be implemented by NCTD and will be reprogrammed at another time by them. During the public comment period, 2 projects were removed from the posted amendment. After the agenda was posted, we removed Project County 21, the Bradley Avenue project. This one will be updated in the next amendment. So from in your project listings, Bradley Avenue is out, which has been taken out. Right? You have it, but we're taking it out.
So it shows it as 40 million million, reducing to 30 million, but now you're saying it's coming out completely?
We're pulling it out of the amendment because they're not gonna make that reduction.
Oh, okay, I see. They're
Yeah,
not.
so they got a little ahead of themselves. They plan to borrow additional funds to build that, and they were programming the payback of those funds they haven't borrowed yet, so.
Oh, I see, okay, so the project cost didn't go down?
No,
Yeah,
the
okay.
project cost
And
didn't
the
go down,
project
so that's why we pulled it
didn't
out,
go
so
away, okay.
we can, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of major, what? I misunderstood, I apologize.
No, you understood correct. It's that's why we pulled it out. So let's see. Just as a follow-up to the delegation action that we brought last time that we talked about at the beginning, that will go to board for approval on July 26th. 86 of the projects in this amendment out of the 97 could have been in an admin mod. There'll only be 11. It would have only been 11 projects in the formal amendment. So the local agencies that provided amendments were adjusting their programming in line with revenue estimates and their budget actions, as well as audit recommendations. So attachment 3 shows the maps, and there's 2 maps in this amendment because we have the Sandag budget, and that's the major. There's a map just for the budget, and then there's one for the major local projects. Attachment 4 summarizes the 7 ordinance and board policy requirements. Since there were no new Transnet projects in this amendment, all projects are considered eligible. Attachment 5 is the cumulative capacity analysis for LSI. So that concludes my report. If there's any questions.
Sue, again, are these changes as a result of, it's been a while, construction costs, or like, for instance, on the Imperial Beach, I know we just talked about their enhancement on that, but they're dropping the Transnet funds 16%. What's that mean in that instance on the Imperial Beach project?
So let me see, which project are you talking about?
Of course, I just had it in front of me.
So there are several Imperial Beach projects. Well, they're a lot of times they're, oh, okay, that's the
Major street improvements.
The major street improvements. So they're juggling funds around most of the time, so to fully fund other projects.
And on this instance, for instance, they're just moving money around, but on those projects, is it related to construction issues, or just, and I can't remember on these as far as movements of money, is it based on need for construction costs going forward,
It can be for
design,
it can be for a lot of reasons. I mean, I believe in this case they took wanted to move those funds to some other projects, and they had to, because they're borrowing this congestion relief, they rebalanced their maintenance versus congestion relief spending, and they'll be moving probably some of the funds to the bike project that they're borrowing
Okay.
from. So they're rearranging their projects based on their budgets most of the time. That's what's going on.
Okay, good,
Both
thank you.
projects.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Nice and easy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Stuart, welcome.
Thanks, sorry I'm late.
No worries.
You're the next chairman.
Yeah, congratulations.
I missed you so much, you're back.
No, just kidding. We're just kidding. Kai is the new chair. Michael will be our vice chair.
I know it was risky to come late to this meeting.
Item number 11, this is the capital grant recipients revenue bonds, and Jose is going to give this to us today.
Yeah, so Andre is not able to be here today, so I'm pinch hitting for him, so hopefully I can do justice to his presentation. So this is regarding a financing that Sandag is proposing to do for the Mid-Coast project. So this is the 2019 capital grant receipts revenue bonds. And this is the finance team. So we've got PFM's our financial advisor, Norton Rose Fulbright is our bond counsel, ORIC is our disclosure counsel, and senior underwriter is Wells Fargo. So I'm going to be covering why we need to issue the bonds, credit rating, potential size and structure, various bond documents. Actually, these were reviewed by the board. We're not bringing these to you. And then the calendar of events. This is the project schedule. We actually have a Mid-Coast project update later today, so I'm going to let John just cover that in the later item, just to make things a little bit more brief. Okay, so essentially, why are we issuing these bonds? So this slide here shows the projected expenditures that are associated with the Mid-Coast corridor. You'll notice that in fiscal year 19, fiscal year 20 are the highest years. Right now we're in the middle of construction, so this is when the highest years of construction expenditures are occurring. If you'll recall, the FFGA, the full funding grant agreement, so these are the federal funds that we secured, a little bit over $1 billion for the Mid-Coast project. These dollars are coming over a period of about 10 years. They started coming in back in 2016. We've got about 4 years worth of funding already received, but the money again is coming over 10 years. So we anticipate about $100 million per year. So what's happening is that we're hitting peak construction expenditures, last year and this year, and yet the federal funds are going to be coming in through 2026. And so what we need to do is advance those federal funds to be able to pay for the project expenditures for the remainder of the duration of construction. So that's really the purpose of this financing, is to issue bonds that would then be paid for as the federal funds arrive to the region over the next 6-7 years. So we, as part of the plan of finance that we do for Transnet, we've also been taking a look at the Mid-Coast project. And so when we last did the plan of finance, we determined that the project needs, from this financing, about $330 million in order to continue paying for project expenditures. So that's shown here in red. The remainder of the funding is shown here in the pie chart. So we've got Transnet contribution of about $560 million. We've got note proceeds of about $568 million. These will be paid for by a TIFIA loan that will be coming in 2021, and that TIFIA loan would then be subsequently paid for with Transnet. So the grant anticipation notes, or as we're calling it here, the grant receipts revenue bonds, is shown here in red, the $331 million. When we did the plan of finance, one of the things that we tried to do is time and size this particular issuance, so that we would minimize or eliminate the need to issue any more Transnet sales tax revenue bonds. So as we proceed, that is the goal, and if things change, obviously we would be coming back to you, but at this time that is what we are aiming to do. Oh, sorry. Okay. Ratings. We requested S&P to issue a rating for these bonds, and they are rating these bonds at an A-. So this is an investment grade rating. You may be more familiar with the Sandex Senior Lien rating, which is a AAA rating. This is, because this is not backed by Transnet, this is backed by federal funds, which are subject to annual appropriations and the federal government. We feel that the A- is, probably as best as we can secure for this particular financing, and we're pretty happy about it. Okay, so the potential size and structure, as I mentioned, it's about $330 million. There would be two different bonds, 2019 A serial bonds, and then a super sinker at $125 million. Super sinker is just sort of a fancy term, meaning it's something that has a maturity, or we need to pay it back at the very end. And essentially, what that is, it's providing the structure of the issuance, the flexibility, should any of the appropriations of the full funding grant agreement either be delayed, say by a year because of government shutdown or whatever, or if there's what's called a haircut, meaning that we receive a little bit less than what we were expecting. So we're expecting about $100 million per year, but let's say that we get $80 million or some other sum during a particular year. Having a super sinker with a maturity far into the future allows us that flexibility to handle that uncertainty. So again, here's the maturities for the bonds. The A series would be have maturities from 2023 to 26, and again the super sinker would be in 2027. They do have call features, both for the A and the B bonds. These would be tax exempt, and again we're bringing this to the Italk, even though it's not paid for with Transnet dollars, but it is supporting a Transnet project, so we just wanted to provide that information. We did bring the bond documents to the board, what was it, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? And so we provided them with the official statement, a trust indenture. So this is a brand new indenture because it deals with full funding grant agreement. It's not associated with the Transnet indenture, as well as a bond purchase agreement and a continuing disclosure agreement. And then lastly, next steps. So we took it to the board June 28th. We're bringing it to you today. We're aiming to post the official statement on July 15th. And then pricing would occur week of July 29th with anticipated closing August 12th. So with that, are there any questions?
If you would indulge a question that relates to finance but goes back to perhaps Ariana's presentation. I'm curious, did you bring up the, from the last board meeting, the request to have that sort of one-page?
Actually, I didn't, but Hassan did during his director report. So we are bringing a one-page summary this Friday. And essentially what we're providing is the same cost information and the same shortfall information that we provided at the February meeting. There's been a lot of discussion, different people are quoting different figures, and so I think there's a lot of confusion. And so, we're happy to provide that one-pager, hopefully to provide a more simplified view of the plan of finance, and hopefully sort of a reset of the numbers so that everybody's understanding of the same numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And so in that vein, it might be useful just to throw it in as an information item just for our next meeting, so kind of we're on the same page as everybody else.
Yep, I'll do that.
Thanks.
Did you have a question? Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jose.
Sure.
All right, and on to number 12. This is the Midcoast Corridor Transit Project Update. John, providing that update.
So good morning. This is our quarterly report on the Midcoast Transit project. And I'm not going to go into detail on this. Most of you know the map, but it's an extension of the line 11 miles from Old Town up to University City, basically following the I-5 corridor. We've got 9 new stations. We're in the process of getting 36 light rail vehicles, and the project is $2.17 billion. About 52% of that's Transnet, and the other remaining is the FGA, federal funds from the Federal Transit Administration. In terms of progress right now, we're about 60% expended on the project, with about, and I'll show on the next slide, we'll show the 50%, about 51% of the project time has elapsed. So right now we are progressing in terms of construction at a pace that should bring us to completion of the project in the summer of 2021. So progress is working well. If you've been out on the project at all, we've almost finished all the utilities that show up here. A lot of the structure is up. If you've been out at I-5 or on Genesee Avenue, you've seen a lot of structure up. We're in the process of building the stations. Most of the stations have some level of construction going on, and we've already started doing track installation. So we'll show you some pictures of that. This is the kind of the word summary of where we are on the schedule. We start out with a baseline of 56 months. Right now we're projecting 57.2 months to completion. We have reach 14, which is finishing the track and structure on Genesee Avenue. And so that is kind of what we're tracking as the significant milestone. Following that would be the systems work, but when we complete that, then we're pretty sure we're going to be on schedule. MTS is going to start their test and startup process in May instead of April, and then we're looking at construction from July of 21 to August of 21. I'm saying this mostly because I think we are actually going to back all of those dates up. We've actually continually been catching up on the schedule. So at the end of the day, the contractor still is guaranteeing me they're going to finish construction in July of 2021. And that gives us to a revenue service date in the fall of 2021. Right now we're looking at November. And this is what our banana chart, I've shown this quite a few times, but this is the same thing where we're looking at about 61% of the project complete with about 50% of the time expended. We're at towards the top of the banana curve, which says, based on historic Caltrans data from their projects, that we're in an area where we're going to finish the project on time. Another concern on the project is Dbe utilization. We're looking at 11.3%. The gold bars indicate what the contractor's plan is to do to bring DBEs on and pay DBEs for the work, and the blue line is where we are right now. This little dip right here is actually quite a bit higher, but when we put this graph together, we didn't have all 3 months of the quarter in there. So we're actually still trending better than that. And so we think the contractor's well on the way to making their DBE goal. We like to throw in a success story. There was the Diversified Landscape, a smaller contractor that was brought on board. They basically had about $32,000 of initial work. MCTC is working with them now to do one of the major landscape portions of the project. They've broken it up into a number of landscape subcontractors. So Diversified is going to pick up about $2.5 million. They've grown from 3 to 29 employees. They're buying equipment, and they have gotten other work based on their success on Mid-Coast. And this just kind of, I think we've often talked about folks on the project. The last 2 quarters, we're tracking, we're just tracking slightly under 1,000 employees a day, a quarter on the project. And so that represents all the people who come in and off of the project. So we might have a subcontractor show up for a couple of days, do some work, and then, so then we're counting all of the people who are showing up on the project. We had a lot of accomplishments this quarter. I mean, these bullet points don't quite cover all of them, but the significant ones were, we had, I think I've talked about before, we had precast girders down Genesee in order not to have false work on that area. 142 precast beams trucked down here from Ontario, Paris, California, and set in place. They were completed in April, and that was significant. If you might have been traveling to that area in April too, you might have seen where we had to close down La Jolla Village Drive to put the girders down Genesee Avenue and La Jolla Village Drive. We had planned to do that in 8 days. It took the contractor 5 to complete that and get the street back open. Another picture we're going to show you is the Flyover Bridge. This is where the trolley goes from the east side of the tracks to the west side to keep going up I-5. That's another place we use precast girders, and we set those girders during an all-work window where the coaster and Amtrak were shut down for a weekend, and they put up 3 spans of precast beams. And that's another milestone that we completed. And really, all of these things have really made a difference in making sure we stay on schedule. We settled property cost on 3 additional properties. The first vehicle was delivered, but today we've got 4 vehicles in the barn down in Trolley for Midcoast. 9 vehicles previously had already been come in for vehicles that MTS bought. So we've got 36 vehicles coming in new to MTS for Midcoast, and 9 that came in that MTS bought themselves, all coming from Sacramento. So these vehicles are being assembled in Sacramento and shipped down. And then we still are projecting to be, like I talked about, on schedule and within budget for the project right now. I'll talk about some of the risks. There are always risks on a project of this size. Now let's just go through some photos. And so this is the San Diego River Bridge. So these are the 2 low. So this is the operating low-sand bridge. That's a brand new bridge we built and put in place in February a year ago. This is the second bridge over the San Diego River. We're not going to put track or anything on that bridge or start operating until we've basically finished building the light rail bridge, because that puts an operating track right next to where we need to do construction, and there's all kind of restrictions that go along with that. And there's been a single track for the past history, and so they're getting along without that double track. And so once we get the LRT bridge pretty much done, all that'll be tracked up. This is a weld, so just to show we're actually into track work. This is the Miranda segment down along Miranda Boulevard. So this is a field weld for tracks. They brought it in on a rail car. It was 1,200-foot strings, and now they're welding those strings together out on the line. This is the Balboa. This is an aerial looking down at Balboa Avenue. So this is the first operating trolley bridge, a low-sand bridge. So that was replaced. The second bridge for low-sand is in place. And again, for the same reason, we're building the abutments and the columns for the bridge for the LRT over, which will be a cast-in-place bridge. So we'll keep operating on that west bridge until we get the LRT pretty well along. And then this is one of the LRT bridges over Rose Creek. So we're basically looking north. The I-5's over here. These are the low-sand tracks on that side. And then this is an LRT bridge. And so we've got, trying to remember whether the LRT had 3 or 4 crossings, but we've got at least 3 bridges that we need to build over Rose Creek itself. And then this is the flyover I was talking about. So this is, we've got to be up, the bottom of that bridge has to be 26 feet over the top of rail. So it's going pretty high up just to cross over from one side to another. And this is these tracks, that's the operating coaster, BNSF at night, and the Amtrak. And so we've had to coordinate that. That's why we want to cast and precast here. So they said these beams, and a lot of these beams, some of them were set at night or during what they call freight windows, so the freight was locked out. But the 3 center vents were all put up over a weekend by the contractor. Some retaining wall work. I don't have a picture in here, but right along the base of this retaining wall, on July 3rd, there's been a bike path through this construction area the whole time we've been doing construction. I think we've never really shut it down for more than a couple hours. And so that bike path opened from Santa Fe Street right up just short of Gilman Drive in its permanent location on July 3rd. So that now is in its permanent location. In here, there's going to be 2 low sand tracks, 2 light rail tracks, and in this area, a 5th light rail track. And so progress is going pretty well. This is looking south from La Jolla Colony, Gilman Drive, down the railroad alignment where we're going to cross underneath Gilman Drive. So these are the approaches to go under the street. A sea of reinforcing bars. This is up at the station at Nobel Drive. That's under construction. This is one of the things that us railroad people really love to see. So this is track going in. This is the bridge deck up. Actually, you're looking south. There's the Mormon Temple. This is the VA Medical Center station. And coming right off of that bridge, we're doing what we call top-down rail construction. So they set the grade and elevation of the rail on basically pins with a cross member holding it up. And so it all gets set to grade and elevation. Put the hangers on, and then down below, really hard to see in these pictures, but there's insets or almost like rebar, but like little mushroom pieces of steel that go into the concrete. So we pour the concrete right up to that. And so at the end of the day, all you have to do is unclip that and your track's pretty much in the position it needs to be in. It's a really efficient way to build track on what we call direct fixation. This is the Ucsd Pepper Canyon Bridge. This is an area where we got a lot of, the bridge, you can see the structure. This is, we came from here, the last picture was just at the top, and then coming down, this is going north. The station and structure is pretty much done. I think what this picture would illustrates is in this area in Pepper Canyon, we were looking at hauling a lot of soil off-site. Soil disposal in San Diego County right now is a pretty difficult thing. There's not a lot of places that take it, and sometimes you got to truck it a long way. So we were actually worked with the university. They have projects that they're going to build in that area, so we're bringing dirt in here at a savings to the project. So we're filling in this area. We're actually ahead of schedule, turning this area right in front of this building, which is their engineering building, and they're going to build a building. Actually, they've started construction of a building in that area. We're going to put an amphitheater over in this area, and so we're working closely with the university to facilitate their construction. And then they're already in the process of putting out an RFP to put student housing in this area, and that's going to connect directly to the station. The university, since we started construction, I think once you see shovels in the ground, people go really realize what's going on. And so they've been really, I think, advancing some of their plans and spending a lot more time trying to get their campus oriented around the two stations in terms of some of their transportation needs. This is a foundation for an elevator. This is at the Voight Station. We're going to have elevated guideway, or basically a pedestrian bridge across Voight Drive from the Voight Station to the Preuss School, and that also is immediately adjacent to Scripps Hospital. More track-down construction, top-down construction for the track work. That's Voight Station. This is the station, the UTC station. So you're looking south. You're looking north again. So here's Westfield on this side, and Costa Verde on the other side, and so we're in the process of building that station right now. This is cast in place. Excuse me. The station we're looking at is cast in place, but these are the precast elements that were set over La Jolla Village Drive, and so you're looking at a cast in place station, precast elements, and then another cast in place station at Executive Drive. In terms of project risk, I think going through the risks that we still have on the project, right-of-way and settlement of the final right-of-way still remains a question. We have a couple properties, about 5 properties, that we haven't completely settled costs. At least one of them, and possibly 2, and maybe a third would end up going to trial. And so once you get into that situation, we're estimating what it's going to cost, but we don't really know exactly. So there's some risk going to trial. Any of those trials are likely to have some goodwill element. The FTA will not participate in goodwill, so all of goodwill settlements coming out of the project will be with Transnet funds. And we plan that into the budget, but that's if those go higher, then we would have to maybe look outside the project for additional Transnet funds. Fez Street Substation, we have substations all the project except one that we're still working with SDG&E on. This is on Genesee Avenue, just north of Eastgate Mall. There's a little stub of a street called Fez, and at the bottom of that there's an SDG&E substation. And we're trying to put our traction power substation in an unoccupied corner of that SDG&E yard. And so we've come a long way working with them. We're not quite 100% there, but we think we're going to get there. It's probably the only place we can really put a substation, in that UTC area, and not create a significant impact to the community or private property. We still have provisional sums we're working on with the contractor on. So when we did the GMP, there were things in the design that weren't quite far enough along that they could give us a solid price on. So we estimated a cost and put it into the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price, the lump sum price for the contract. But by the nature of that, I'm telling you, that wasn't a guaranteed maximum price lump sum. We had to negotiate those, and we're still negotiating them. And there's some cost risk involved with that. And then the last risk is just construction, the unknowns that you reach in construction. Every month that ticks by, we seem to be clearing more and more hurdles. Some of the pictures I showed you, are where we've gone way past some of the hurdles. So schedule and construction risks are really starting to become less and less as we move on in the project. This is just a summary of where we are with the properties, and like I said, the gist here is that we have some properties that we still want to settle. A couple of the property owners want to see most of the construction done before they settle on their final damage costs. Based on where my contractor is, I think we're not damaging them very much, and I think we'll be able to settle those out. And then a couple of them, specifically La Jolla Village Square and the Noville Drive Station, we will probably end up with those folks in court, trial over value. We have possession. And then this is just a picture of the vehicles. Like I said, we've got 4 of them in the trolley barn. What will happen now is they're going to commission them, and then the CPUC will go through a safety commissioning, and then they'll actually keep them moving out on the line. You can't just let these vehicles sit for another 2.5 years. So they'll be doing some work on those. Community outreach has been a big part of the project. If you've noticed, we put a lot of false work up over I-5 at Voigt Drive for the LRT bridge. It's actually a double stack false work. Now we've got tunnel false work down by the La Jolla Village Square and the Temple. And so keeping the public informed about the traffic closures. We've also then, we're meeting with the community groups. So the Linda Vista, Claremont, Pacific Beach, and University, we generally meet with them on a monthly basis just as an update. We have monthly updates with the district council staff. A lot of presentations out in the community. We've added additional project signage. We've responded to continuous media events and requests for information. And then we've been taking elected officials out on tours. And so from a standpoint of how we've worked, how well we've done on project outreach, I think we've done a really good job in project outreach. The contractor works directly with the individuals whose property they're impacting, and Sandag looks at the greater community and works with them in terms of notifications for traffic closures and construction impacts. And so that's my, I'm going to conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions about the project.
I always like these presentations. Thank you.
Yeah, John, the CMGC method, project delivery, I know that on our audit, performance audit, there's always a question of how it's going. So how's that going, Joe? Because the last time you did the audit, said it was going well, contractors are working well with the owner and all that. How's it going?
Yeah, you know, I think I'm finding that the CMGC process is, I don't think we could have built this project the way we're doing it without this. I mean, the fact that we get to work closely with the contractor, you know, before we went to construction. The contractor is living up to some of the promises they made in terms of really just, if there's hurdles out in the field, they don't turn them into change orders. They work through most of those issues. They've been good on public outreach as they said they would. We work with them very collaboratively. There's nothing's perfect out there, and so we have our staff, and there's still people who tend to want to fall back into the conflict mentality, and so that's something we work on a regular basis. But given what we're doing out here, not just with Midcoast, but with the low sand corridor projects, and then what we're doing with the university, a bunch of separate low bid contracts would have not been manageable. I mean, Sandag would have carried so much risk that it would have been difficult. But I also think CMGC's, my experience right now is if I had a different contractor, I don't know that I'd get the same experience. So I think selecting the right contractor is probably one of the key components in any CMGC work.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. That was item number 12. On 13, Linda and the regional program update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, similar to your last item and other core status updates we have. Happy to come and give you our next regular status update of our Bikeway corridor program. And just by way of sort of some background, in 2013, our board of directors set aside $200 million from our Transnet program for active transportation projects. That equates to 77 miles of bikeway projects, but other features in each of those projects are pedestrian improvements, traffic calming, those sorts of features all working together. We right now are either have open or have under some form of design 70 of those 77 miles, most under design. And we have currently just under 9 miles open to the public, and I'll show you some progress and a recent opening that we did. And we spend a lot of time at the City of San Diego. About $150 million of our program will be invested in the city. So we spend a lot of time a couple blocks from here making progress. One thing, sorry, I wanted to point out on the map, one of the comments that you gave me last time when I was here in April, we draw your eye with the colors on the map to the EAP, the Early Action Program, but we had kind of lumped completed and future regional bikeways in one, so we separated those, and so you have that as one of your attachments this time around. And then this just shows in a different display the progress that we're making. So most of our miles, over half, well over half, are in final design. So what that means is that we've environmentally cleared that project and we're in some stage of design, 65, 90, 95, that kind of thing. We have doubled the amount of miles since we last talked that are in construction. We issued an invitation for contractor bids after your meeting in April for about 6.5 miles, and we'll talk about that. And then those 8.8 miles that we have open in the region. So just some recent progress, some highlights. First off, in May, we opened 1.3 miles of coastal rail trail, which will ultimately span from Oceanside down here to the City of San Diego, 44 miles. We opened 1.3 miles in the Cardiff area, and so what this photo shows you is kind of on the left-hand side is Pacific Ocean, and then you see the low sand corridor, the rail corridor. We also opened a second track about the same time in this general area. And then you can see the railroad corridor and you can see the coastal rail trail over on the right-hand side. So 1.3 miles from Chesterfield intersection up to Santa Fe Drive, under crossing in Cardiff. A couple things that project managers or program managers always love to see are happy people biking and walking, right, and using your facility. So here's a couple of shots down near the Cardiff area, the Chesterfield Drive area. In the left-hand side, and then the right-hand side kind of went up to the northern part of the corridor, and we're looking south in that photo. The other thing we like to see is happy board members too, right? So this is Mayor Blakespear from the City of Encinitas and the other city council members, and she's also our vice chair, and she was instrumental in making this project happen. So we're always glad to have ribbon cuttings, and we had one in early May. It rained on us, but that didn't dampen anyone's spirits, I think. And so it's, I live in that community. I walk it every weekend. I just love seeing how many people are using it. So that's great satisfaction. Another project is our Rose Creek Bikeway, and this is related to some of John's photos that he showed you Mid-Coast, because this is one of our Mid-Coast family of projects. This is 2 miles of Class 1 separated shared use path. We're about 67% complete with this. Show you a rendering here, and what we're looking at is kind of in near the Rose Creek area, and we're looking north. So if you saw the mountains in the background, that's kind of where I-5 is right now. But happy to show you a construction photo of that same bridge. We just kind of turned around looking at the south version. This was first installed in the corridor in last fall. So we've been working on various aspects of it. And then this shot, they're just laying some of the utilities that are going to hang underneath the bridge. So that's what we've been doing lately. Lots of retaining walls, lots of drainage structures, as you might imagine, in this project area. So that they're concentrating on that right now. Some grading work. And this photo shows you, we're looking kind of west, we're on the south side, and then in the background you see Mission Bay, or Mission Boulevard, Mission Bay Drive, I'll get it right, Mission Bay Drive. And so part of this project is going underneath both Interstate 5 and that very busy intersection, Mission Bay Drive. So that will be a very nice feature. Right now that is a tough connection to make. whether you're walking or you're on a bike. So we're happy to grade separate that when we're finished and create that safe connection for people on their bikes or walking. And then we were also lately been working on some of the work on Santa Fe Drive, and this is a shot looking at that section. You can see I-5s on the right-hand side. You can see the sign on I-5. So they're working on this end of the project currently. And then another thing that John mentioned was the Rose Canyon Bikeway that opened last week. And so this is up kind of in that northern section near the Carl Strauss Brewery, and we're looking north right now, and that's the finished open path. This is another 1.3 miles, so when we're finished with both projects, 3 more miles of coastal rail trail. And this is very heavily used now. During a weekday, there'll be over 400 people on their bikes. It's a key connection in our network from kind of that Mission Valley, Mission Bay area and up to UC San Diego and UTC. On the weekends, it's even, I think it's closer to 500 people are using this. So this was a kudos to the Midcoast team, to Jim and John and their team for getting this open. And then along the way, during the construction process, always keeping a connection open. And if we couldn't keep it open, we provided shuttles because it is so heavily used. So it's a nice team effort on that side. And then we're going up north to the Inland Rail Trail. We are currently under construction a couple of more miles in the county of San Diego, in the city of Vista, and a small section in the city of Oceanside. So here's some work they're working on in terms of some curb ramps, some grading work. Our big news since we last talked was the installation of a Class 1 bridge in the county of San Diego portion near the Buena Vista Creek Sprinter Station. And we did this overnight, so a couple of shots here, and then here's the finished bridge. So this is in the county portion. The Inland Rail Trail section that we're in construction on right now, about 70% done, and hopefully in the next meeting or two that you have, we'll be able to show you ribbon cutting of that late summer, early fall of that next few miles. And just a few more shots of the bridge and the work there. And I mentioned our work, we work a lot with the city of San Diego, and so we were able to open bids for about 6.5 miles in the North Park Mid-City area, along Landis, along Georgia, and along Meade Avenue. And those are looking really good. We are scheduled right now to be going to our board of directors at the end of July, hopefully award a contract for those and get started later this year and take a couple of years building that project. That's going to be our first urban bikeway for the city of San Diego. The city also approved our plans for our first section of the Uptown Bikeways section, literally right from our building, heading up 5th Avenue up to the Hillcrest area and then back down 4th Avenue, the same corridor. And so we are right now working to get the invitation for contractor bid out for that. If it's not going to be the end of July, it's going to be early next month. So that's exciting for us. Yeah.
A quick question on the press coverage last week on the concerns by business owners. Are those city projects and not Transnet projects the ones that the current concern? Because the city's embarking on a lot of redesign. Is that embarking on a lot of all of that Sanday project?
Yeah, I believe you're referring to the 30th Avenue project in North Park, and that is the city of San Diego. So that's been in the news lately.
So it's not a Sanday, it's not a Transnet
it is
project.
No.
So some of these projects the city's going forward with are just city projects, nothing to do with.
Yeah, correct. I mean, in the end, just like a highway network, just like a transit network, they all fit together, right? To get you from A to B to C, you're just going to walk or you're going to take a bike. So our program, we work a lot in coordination with our local jurisdictions, make sure they all fit when they're all built and together. And then the city also has 3 other projects that is under review: Pershing Bikeway, Imperial Bikeway, and then a section of our Bayshore Bikeway, which is along Barrio Logan, along Harbor Drive in the Barrio Logan community. That one is very important to us to keep on our schedule. We have, that's really our first state active transportation program funded project. We've already asked for and received our one-time only time extension, and so we're going to be sending a lot of work over to Caltrans in September and October. So we're working really closely with the city to make sure they can approve our plans by then. So.
Linda, can I go back to that question about the bike paths again?
Yes.
Whose decision is it to design those? I mean, maybe this is off track here on our jurisdiction, but designing the bike paths and taking away parking spots and all that. How's that, and how's Sandag involved in that decision-making process?
Well, both we and the city of San Diego and other cities have a bicycle master plan, right? We always start with the plan. So we have a regional bike plan that kind of guides where we work. The city has a bike master plan, guides where they work. For our projects, I'll just speak to, we look at curb to curb. There's a lot of competition for that space, right? That public space, whether it is a vehicle lane or lanes, whether it's a bike lane, a sidewalk, parking. So parking is a very sensitive community issue. We work a lot on our projects with parking. If you're gonna put in a neighborhood traffic circle, for example, you don't want a stop sign, you wanna slow everyone down, you don't wanna stop people, that sort of thing. But there's gonna be, trade-offs with putting that in and slowing traffic. And a lot of times at those intersections, you will have to take a space or two because of the sight line, that sort of thing. The city's decision on 30th, right now, they're looking at, taking the parking out and working with the businesses and that kind of thing has caused some concerns. We hear a lot of those same concerns on our projects. We maybe take criticism that we spend too much time in the planning side of things, but we do a lot of outreach as a general rule on our projects because of that. Yeah.
So Park Avenue at Harbor,
Yes.
it was the terminus of the Bayshore Bikeway,
Yes.
and it ended kind of ugly because there was no connection to across Park Avenue. It's been in the paper recently that's going to be a crossing.
Oh, just the road crossing itself.
Is the Bayshore Bikeway going to be able to continue across Parkway and pick up the Class 1 that's on the north side?
Yes, we will be in that area and just south of Park Boulevard on Harbor. We switch over about Cesar Chavez. We cross over from the east side of the road with our Class 1 to the west side. So we'll be on the west side, like kind of where the convention center is, and we'll be able to make that connection up the Embarcadero. Yeah, we got some early input from PUC, from the city of San Diego, that maybe we didn't want to be on that east side at Park because of that roadway, that opening of Park Boulevard. So we redesigned our work in order to get that approved. Yeah. That's really it. We're a little bit busy. We have about 24 projects in our budget from FY19 we're carrying over, but really happy to answer any questions or any other comments that you have.
Well, first of all, thanks for doing the color alteration on the map. At least for my eye, it just makes it so much more clear what's going on, so I really appreciate that. Just a couple of questions. First, what's actually the legal status vis-a-vis the bikeway of e-bikes and scooters? Or is that not even like a legal issue? I guess I'm just wondering if you have these sort of alternative active means of transportation, are they fully entitled to be using these things? To what extent, particularly like with e-bikes, does that create safety questions that may not have been contemplated in the initial designs? Any thoughts around those?
Yeah, just a couple, and they're just general more than anything. But for the e-bikes and scooters, they can use our bikeways. The city of San Diego, for example, recently has implemented some scooter guidelines. So it's for the safety on sidewalks and with pedestrians and that kind of thing. Our cycle tracks, if you will, Class 4 that are going maybe from up 5th down 4th, for example, those are bike only. They're not pedestrian. There's an adjacent sidewalk, for example. So those e-bikes are fine, those scooters are fine.
Gotcha.
It might be up to a local city to implement, like the city of San Diego has, some guidelines, some requirements on where they go.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the other thing I was curious about is, I know from prior discussions about the master plan, there's been a lot of emphasis in terms of linking bikeways together, so you have kind of uninterrupted ability to be riding bikes more extensively. To what extent has there also been emphasis on connecting bikeways to mass transit stations? And to the extent that there is, would funds from this program also be available for secure storage of bikes at mass transit hubs, for example? Because I know apparently that's one of the big issues that people who want to bike to mass transit locations have, is just lack of secure storage.
Right. And more probably of a question that our iCommute staff works with, a local jurisdiction, something like that, on bike lockers or bike storage. Now, we do have, as part of all of our Bikeway projects, bike parking. So we, various alternatives, but it is like a bike rack or some sort of bike you can lock your bike up to. You see different ones around the cities and that kind of thing. So that's a part of our program. Generally, we're not putting in storage, but there are programs we have here through iCommute that local jurisdiction or transit agency have used before. We also have, a lot of our projects like the Inland Rail Trail go right adjacent to the Sprinter Corridor, access all Sprinter stations. So we'll work with NCTD on those kind of connections.
So would you characterize it as something that is prioritized to try to create connections to mass transit in addition just to broadening and lengthening the bikes?
Yeah, definitely. So, and I'll just, one more example I'll use is along University Avenue in the city of San Diego. Is we received a transit grant that we're going to implement from our Bikeway project there, but we're going to create safe transit islands because that's a very busy transit corridor. So we're going to basically have a transit stop, a bus stop, where the Bikeway will go behind it, and we'll create a safe crossing for people that want to use the bus. We call them like kind of little islands out. But we did receive a transit grant that we're going to use to help fund our bike project on the transit side too. So we always look at that. We work with NCTD and MTS on a lot of our projects when we have those kind of connections.
Are there currently, question you asked about storage facilities for bikes, are there currently on the trolley and today, are there storage, big storage, not just racks, I mean like storage facilities?
Serrano Valley Station has one that fits about 4 or 5 bikes in. I see when I go there.
It's not that large.
Coaster.
I mean, that's
just one I've seen. I don't know how many are.
Is that something that I wonder if that's something that they're doing on the mid-coast, because you're right, at the stations that they're putting them, especially at the beach, and some of these other ones, that would seem like they'd be a prime spot for a lot of those. So.
Yeah, definitely. It could be the transit district. It could be us. It could be a local jurisdiction. If you go up to the Oceanside Transit Center, the city received a grant and implemented a very large bike storage facility, kind of like what's in our parking structure, that big, for a couple dozen bikes. So, sort of.
Thank you.
You got any big plans for the Grand Central? You'll be able to.
Of course. And right on Pack Highway is a section of Coastal Rail Trail, so we're coordinating with that too. Yeah. That's a good connection.
Any other questions for the? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
That gets us to item 14, which is continued public comments, if there's any. We didn't have any to start.
We had so many, yeah.
We're not having a meeting in August. So just FYI, our next scheduled meeting is not August 14th as shown. So it's September, I'm assuming it's the second Wednesday of the month.
It's the 11th.
The 11th.
That's right.
Kai, do you approve of that?
Yes, Kai.
Mr. Chairman?
One less for Mike when I don't come.
All right. With that, I think we are adjourned.
Thank you, Dustin, for your leadership.
Yeah.
I credit Jose and Ariana.
Yes, thank you.